Yeah, we've been wanting to cover Lovecraft at Lotus Eaters for a long while, and we've covered quite a few things that are Lovecraft adjacent. On the screen, I don't know if you can see it on the video you're watching, we've got Junji Ito's picture of H.P. Lovecraft that he drew a portrait of. Junji Ito being a Japanese comic author who's heavily inspired by the works of Lovecraft. And speaking of which, Lovecraft is probably one of the most influential horror writers of the modern period. You can't really go anywhere without Lovecraft having inspired some author or some work which has gone on to inspire things that you've probably heard of. Stephen King, I mean, being the most notable example of somebody who was heavily inspired by Lovecraft, which is ironic given the complete divergence of their own social views.
Right, yeah.
But Lovecraft is someone that I've appreciated for a long time. I was introduced to him through the music of Metallica. Because they're big Lovecraft fans and have at least 3 songs written about the Cthulhu mythos. Call of Cthulhu, obvious. Thing That Should Not Be, which is based directly on the Shadow Over Innsmouth. And one song off of their 2016 album, which name I cannot remember, but which the chorus is just James shouting, Cthulhu Awakens. So I assume it's based off of the Call of Cthulhu.
Sounds pretty badass.
Yeah, so as a young teenager learning about that, I thought, well, I'd heard of him as well. I'd heard of Cthulhu, a big squid monster. Sounds awesome. So I got some of the collections and read those stories. But this was my first opportunity to go back and reread in about 10 years, maybe a bit longer than that. I'd not touched it in a long while, and it was a great experience to do so. I'll also preface by saying that we were originally going to be focusing primarily on At the Mountains of Madness.
Yes.
Which is one of his most famous stories and one which has influenced, again, a lot of people. John Carpenter was influenced in the naming convention for his film At the Mouth of Madness. The problem is, for as famous as that story is, and as well regarded and loved, it's kind of like a lore master story. Right. It's slow, it's plodding, it's mainly a guy going around a mountain describing the hieroglyphs that he is able to see, which gives a huge lore dump for the actual Cthulhu mythos. But as a moment-to-moment narrative, it's not very thrilling. Yeah. So I suggested we switch to Shadow Over Innsmouth.
I just arbitrarily picked At the Mountains of Madness because I thought, it's about 100 pages, so it's a longer story, it'll give us plenty to talk about. And then Harry just saw my face just slipping into regret and despair as I was like, am I supposed to understand?
Well, it's the fact that about 2 pages in, you kind of looked up at me with this confused, quizzical look and said, are all of his stories written like this? And it clocked for me because I remember reading it as a teenager and I thought, Yep, that was my reaction as well, because I started with Call of Cthulhu and then moved on to Shadow Over Innsmouth, Dunwich Horror, which are the 3 stories I reread in preparation for this. All very well written, all exciting. They've got some mystery, they've got drama, they've got action in them. At the Mountains of Madness, very drawn out, very plodding, and it didn't really thrill me. And so I'm glad it wasn't just me. Perhaps, I know you've listened to them in audiobook. Does it work better as an audiobook?
I didn't think that about At the Mountains of Madness. It's like The Thing. You know, John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
It's like that. So my relationship with Lovecraft, I'd let you know where I am with it.
Please.
I read years ago when I was like 20 or 22. I read that one, I can't even remember what it's called now, about where it's a very short one, where it's the mummy wakes up. So I read that, and it's actually kind of almost abstract. And I read that, and I was like, I don't really like that. And I was young, and it's not one of his best stories, I don't think. It's like called Inhotep or something like that. And so from then on, I was like, I'll give Lovecraft a swerve. And he's inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. I'll just read Edgar Allan Poe. I love Edgar Allan Poe, right? I don't need Lovecraft. He's an American. 20th century American, not interested. I don't, I'm only joking with that. So for years, I didn't get into Lovecraft for years and years. And then, I don't know, maybe just for a Lotus Eater, so maybe 5-6 years ago, something like that, I listened to on audiobook, it must have been the Dunwich Horror. That's the one where there's that kid that grows up abnormally fast, right?
Yeah.
And then gets killed in the
library.
In the library. Yeah, right, okay. So at that point I was like, I've got Lovecraft wrong. This is great. And then in the years since then, every now and again someone will send me a link to something Lovecraft had said that's like really based. Stroke completely racist. I'm like, oh well,
Two
maybe.
overlapping.
Yeah.
Very often.
I'm like, well, Lovecraft, okay. But I still hadn't really done much Lovecraft until about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago.
Sure.
It came up in the office. Do you want to do At the Mountains of Madness? And I was like, sure, okay, I'll read it or listen to it on audiobook. And anyway, so I did. Thought it was brilliant, but realised I didn't know anywhere near enough about the lore. I hadn't read anywhere near enough hardly read any Lovecraft. So in the last 5 weeks or so, I've gone back and listened to on audiobook, because tons of it is on YouTube. You can find whole playlists.
I believe Mr. H Reviews has done a few audiobooks.
Yeah, he pointed a few out to us, sent us some links.
Yeah, your old buddy Nate.
So over the last 5 weeks or so, I've listened to 12, 15 of them.
You probably
long
read
ones
more
as well.
than me in that
The
case.
long ones, all the long ones as well. Like where I'm like playing a computer game. I'm not interested in a 15-minute short story. I want the one that's 2 hours long or more.
Yeah.
And I even listened to one the other day that was a collaboration. That was basically Night at the Museum. It's Night at the Museum. So yeah.
Just as funny? Just as slapstick?
No.
Did you imagine Owen Wilson?
Really horrible and dark. So I've just been Lovecraft maxing for the last few weeks, and it's been really, really enjoyable.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of his stories, to start the literary criticism, a lot of his stories are the same, but most people like that, right? Most recording artists, they've got a sound, and all their albums more or less sound similar. A lot of writers, I'm thinking of Arthur Conan Doyle. A lot of his stories are very formulaic. It's basically the same story over and over and over again,
Well,
but with little
it
tweaks.
becomes, once you've found your theme, your stories become variations on the theme.
Right.
And it's something that works. And for Lovecraft, I mean, I believe he was writing stories to get paid, to make a living for the publications, most notably Weird Tales, that he was being published in. So if he finds something Weird Tales are going to keep accepting, he can expand on it as he goes, maybe write a larger novella here and there, like At the Mountains of Madness, but he's got a formula that works, then he'll go with it. And he did.
Also, just to build on that, that's absolutely true. But also, people that know Lovecraft and have read lots and lots of Lovecraft will also say what I just said there's really unfair, because there are loads of exceptions to that. There are loads of other stories he wrote which actually aren't anything like his sort of the classic formula of a single first-person narrator going somewhere creepy, getting chased by something you never really describes properly,
And then going mad.
and then at the end wondering if it was all a dream or whether he's mad. Like, so not all of his stories at all. Like, a lot of them are.
And Shadow Over
But not
Innsmouth,
all of them.
this one is like cut to that template
Yeah.
to a T.
Yeah.
Well, the ending is slightly different, because instead of going mad or refusing to accept what's gone on, the character that you're following finds out that he's deeply connected to Oh well, yeah. Spoilers for almost 100-year-old stories.
Yeah, no, I'm
right
joking.
here.
I'm joking.
But I like your idea of Lovecraft maxing, because I like to think that you've discovered and embraced all new prejudices that you never before thought possible.
Your powers have doubled since before you read Lovecraft.
Well, that's one thing I think that's worth saying right off the bat, is put it in his context. So he died of natural causes before World War II, like
1937.
There you go, 1937, and he was
Some
only
of his stories hadn't been published by
a
then
lot of
either.
them, yeah. And he was only in his mid-40s, so he died young.
Yeah.
But so that's important to remember, that he's basically doing all his writings in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. Right, so, and he's a man of his time.
Right.
His hometown is Providence, Rhode Island. So he's a New Englander. Not all of his stories, by any way, but the majority of them are in New England, right?
Right.
So I think that's one of the first things you've got to say about Lovecraft before you actually go any further.
Because he's a very, very, today, a very controversial author because of his overt and explicit racial prejudices.
Which is extremely overt in this particular story, which isn't at all why we chose it.
Yeah.
And social prejudice as well.
I was going to say, and his class prejudices. He very clearly is of the WASP middle and upper business classes, and holds the lower orders, particularly those that he perceives as inbred backwards rural folk, with complete contempt.
Yes. He has strong views on the
comical contempt.
the white trash. Yeah.
But then you read about how he moved, as we were discussing before, to New York. and he was in such a traumatic shock at the level of what he considered to be human detritus that occupied the city in the early 20th century, that he couldn't eat and lost a load of weight. And
lost like 40 pounds.
Yeah,
from stress.
He was always very sickly, but he became particularly sickly in New York because he hated the fact that it was full of Jews, Italians, the lower orders, anyone who wasn't blacks. The fact anyone who wasn't a properly bred wasp was utter scum to him.
Yeah. This really is the point as well, isn't it? When it's like, oh, Lovecraft was a white supremacist. It's like, no, he was an English supremacist.
Well, yeah.
One of the reasons why he wanted, advocated for intervening in World War One on the American side was because of the fact that, no, we need to go save the motherland. We need to go save the homeland. We need to save the English and help them out.
There's one thing to say about New York. I believe he moved there for like about 2 years towards the end of his life. And only found out a day or two ago that he got married briefly. He was like married for like, is that right? For like a year or two, and then that fell apart. And all of that happened in New York.
Yeah, ironically enough, to a Jewish woman.
Oh, really?
But he did say that she was well assimilated.
Oh, okay.
So
and it did fall apart anyway.
There's one of the lesser-known stories I listened to that's, I can't remember the name of it, but other than it's got the word Brooklyn in it. And I don't know, like horror in Brooklyn or something, or terror in Brooklyn or something like that. And
always relevant.
And it's quite a good one. But you can tell, it just it drips through it, this absolute disgust of New York. Like in there, the sort of the premise of that story is sort of that you wouldn't think that there'd be like ancient rites going on and like human sacrifice and stuff in Brooklyn, but there is.
Oh,
like that's the thing. Right,
I certainly think there would be, actually.
Right. So yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say again before we get on to sort of really the detail of the Innsmouth story is a little bit more about his life. And when you learn a little bit more about that, I think it puts a lot of the stuff, it explains a lot of his stories, why he keeps returning to the same themes over and over and over again. One thing is that in his various stories, I was listening to one just yesterday about how he feels like perhaps our real waking reality is just virtual and sleep is real. Your dreams and the sleep state, that's the real reality.
Was that the Dream Quest? There's one called the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath.
No, it wasn't that one, I don't think.
And there's another one that's got sleep in the title.
The point is he talks about sleep and dreams all the time.
And that corresponds very well with the ending of this particular story.
All right. And apparently he suffered from sort of night terrors most of his life, or had crazily vivid dreams all his life. And the first thing he ever wrote when he was a little kid, he was like 6 years old, he did a little kiddy's attempt at a story. And it was about these crazy dreams he's got. And then another thing, his dad was institutionalised as insane when he was like 3.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Died in an asylum,
of syphilis,
and then years later, well, syphilis eventually sends you mad, so I guess
right,
sure. And then years later, his mum went to an asylum as well.
No wonder they pop up so much in his stories, and it makes it quite appropriate that the name of the fictional town that he created for his stories, Arkham, was also appropriated in the Batman series as Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It all connects together.
So that's the other theme that Lovecraft just returns to. It might be every single thing I've ever listened to or read is madness, the theme of madness.
Do the characters go mad in Herbert West? I know that's...
The Reanimator?
Yeah, the Reanimator. Because that's one of his stories that also got a loose adaptation in the 1980s, I believe, where it's a film just called Reanimator, a video nasty B-movie type thing, which I've not watched, but I need to watch.
See, I don't think
where they're just basically reanimating corpses and creating...
Frankenstein.
Zombies, yeah.
It's like a Frankenstein thing, and the various monsters come back and get the guy. So, for example, in that, it's a good example. I think, I might be wrong, that the main character, the main narrator, doesn't go insane, but the other main character in it, the Reanimator, he is sort of going insane slowly, and still in that story, loads. It's like, something happens, and he said, and in that moment, I figured there was the first kernels of insanity were creeping in. Like he just talks about it all the time, all the time. Something or other happens, or something or other someone says, and it's like, and that's insane. And that's the first, like, again, kernel of madness creeping in. Did I imagine it or am I mad? Just that over and over and over and over again.
To return to your point as well, Beau, about what you were saying about the madness of his parents as well. After the institutionalization and death of his father, I believe he made reference to the fact, bear in mind, he'd only have been very early teenage years by this point, perhaps even a little younger, but he talked about being suicidal, right, wishing to kill himself. And so these dark thoughts of terror were obviously, as you say, from his mind from a very young age. And so you have to ask yourself, well, okay, if he felt like that from such a young age, what kept him powering through? What led him to actually keep going, keep working, keep meeting people, keep caring about life? Because obviously a huge part of the Lovecraftian philosophy is cosmicism, the idea that it's just an indifferent ancient universe and humans aren't at the center of it. There's nothing particularly special about us, so why care?
And the true reality is so unknowable and horrifying that it drives you mad to even get a small glimpse of it.
Yes. However, he had an insatiable curiosity just about the world, right? He was a chemistry.
He was actually a bit of a scientist.
Astronomy, yeah. Just all number of subjects, scientific subjects, just putting life under the microscope. Even up till his final days of his death, he was, so long as he still had strength to lift his pen, he was chronicling like the pain and how it felt.
Oh, he was also a famous man of letters.
Yes.
He wrote volumes and volumes and volumes of correspondence with all sorts of different people. So while he was known as quite a shut-in, his mind clearly wanted to understand and explore the world and to hold relationships with other peoples, even if he himself was not one to often be seen out and about anywhere.
Yes.
He was friends with loads and loads and loads of other important sci-fi and horror writers.
I forget the name of the guy who created the Conan series, but he was friends and in correspondence with him quite often.
They would borrow each other's ideas and steal it, like deliberately, happily, willingly, steal each other's bits of each other's universe and write them into their own stories.
Well, I know that in the books, Conan apparently has a lot of references to the Cthulhu mythos, which, outside of it just being awesome Conan Barbarian stories, makes me want to read those even more.
Yeah. There's a few things you mentioned there that I think worth noting again before we sort of dive into the one story we're sort of meant to be talking about here. So the idea that his dad went insane and his mum went insane, and on some level, he is insane, but he's sort of not completely insane, but just aware that he's sort of unbalanced in some way. And that thing where obviously all the stories and all the main characters in it are absolutely obsessed and interested in like the occult and unknowable, unprovable things. And they're very, very often there's a dialogue between that character and a completely materialist, scientific, logical character, often. And that's Lovecraft himself. He was a scientist.
Yes.
First and foremost. But also, obviously, loved all things occult and weird and paranormal. I think they're the best sort of paranormal people, are people that actually have a grounding in real science. So they're not just completely woo-woo, crystal skull, like paper-thin nonsense. It is actually grounded in logic and reason and science as well at the same time. That's what makes it good and believable and has substance to it. Because
absolutely.
It creates a tension within the stories that makes them interesting, because the character is always questioning themselves and in conflict with themselves.
Well, I'm a reasonable, logical man. What I just saw could not have happened. It could not have, but it did.
Well, this is exactly the stock character. Stock's a bit pejorative, but like the type of character in M.R. James's ghost stories. Just, the arch rationalist who just comes into contact with the supernatural.
If you enjoyed this piece of premium content from the Lotus Eaters, head to our website where you can find more.